So I'm Michael Quinn Patton, and Sara Vaca has been working on a periodic table of evaluation into that idea of doing a periodic table. What attracted you to that notion?
I was aware of the rich variety of tools or elements in the evaluation world, and that was a bit contradictory or opposed to what I saw in reports that was more or less the same over and over. And so, just to become a better evaluator and to make evaluation more useful and more impactful, I thought that if I knew the catalog, if I knew what the choices are, I could better cater my methodology or my design to each evaluation. So yeah, it was I gave it the form of a periodic table of evaluation with no atomic weights. So just placed elements placed conveniently for being grouped in categories, but not with particular order. I configured this in this way just to make it look interesting or just for fun. But the whole thing is like a list, is like a catalog.
So here is your original periodic table of evaluation published in the Journal of Multidisciplinary Evaluation in the summer of 2024. Here you can see a comparison between the original periodic table and the new periodic table of evaluation 2.0. Simply the visual gives you a sense of what the difference is between the original version and the expanded version. And what we'll do now is take you through each of the categories in the new table of evaluation 2.0 and describe what those categories are, category by category, and then come back and discuss the whole and how to use it, what we think can be the applications of this, and the ideas that undergird it. But first, let's take people through what the different categories are. The periodic table of evaluation 2.0 consists of 14 categories that are color-coded and made up of individual cells that specify details about each category. Beginning on the left, the first category is paradigms, followed by evaluation purposes, then findings uses, process uses, and evaluands. Number 6 is intervention conceptualization. Number 7 is evaluation roles. 8 is evaluation questions about the evaluand. 9 is a category on methods for data collection. The 10th category is evaluation approaches. The 11th is sampling. 12 is methods for analysis. 13 is approaches to causality. And the 14th and final approach are reporting approaches. And at the top, underneath the title, are frameworks for evaluation. And at the bottom are the criteria for evaluation quality standards, the standards for evaluation. Thirdly, there is a glossary that accompanies the periodic table that defines each cell in the table with references. That glossary is available at Sara Vaca's website. The link to that site is shown here on this slide and on the page introducing the YouTube video, and will appear again at the end of this video. So the glossary is an accompanying elaboration of what each cell represents. What we're going to do now is take you through each one of the categories to discuss its purpose and how they all fit together.
What are the categories that we included?
Begins with paradigms.
Uh-huh.
And from the beginning of the field, the debate about paradigms has been an important part of the history of evaluation, making them explicit. It's one of the things that is often not made explicit in evaluations. People get right into the methods and the design, but don't think explicitly about what paradigm they're operating within. And so our first category makes distinctions about the overarching paradigms that frame how we think about things.
Michael, do you think each of us have like a clear or a couple of clear paradigms where we position ourselves in?
I think that any given evaluation is going to be dominated by a particular way of making sense of the world, and that's what we mean by a paradigm. Um, but that, as I
But that,
said, it's often implicit. It's not made explicit, and that part of this is to help people be conscious about the whether they're being a constructivist or um, a pragmatist.
yeah, because the evaluation is going to be guided by one, but is brought by people.
Right.
So yeah, I've always liked this. There were some tests I saw at some point just to see which paradigm you are. I think that's interesting to be aware of. Where do you position yourself? Okay, and this category was already in the original one, but with less options. Category 2 are purposes. That was also there in the second one.
Well, purpose is really what drives everything else in the evaluation. So that the being clear about purpose is the frame for all the other decisions you make, and to realize that the purposes can be in conflict with each other. So accountability and learning take you in different directions, and we are kind of blasé about saying, well, the purpose of this evaluation is both accountability and learning. Those are quite different things. And being clear about those purposes, Eleanor Chelimsky, one of our great pioneers, in which she says purpose drives everything else in the evaluation.
Yeah. So now we have a couple of categories that were not were not there in the original one, which are finding uses and process uses.
What purpose does is take us then from a big picture kind of purpose into the quite specific ways in which an evaluation is going to support decision making or learning, how the findings are going to be used. And in doing training around this and writing books about it over the years, the thing that makes it, I think, important to put it up front and early in the periodic table, the third category, is that the when I ask people about use, they often say, well, use depends on how the findings come out. And what we've learned is if you don't know how you're going to use an evaluation before you do it, you won't know what to do with it after you get it. That, in fact, determining priority use comes at the beginning. And then you design the evaluation within a purpose to produce certain kinds of uses. The process use is about how the people who are engaged in evaluation are affected and how the organization or program is affected. So, for example, when people in performance measurement say what gets measured gets done, that's a reminder that when we pick measures, people adapt their behavior to work to meet those measures, and the evaluation is already having an impact before any data are gathered. That's the process use. Doing logic models, doing theories of change, um, even determining the purpose of the evaluation and its findings uses are all having an effect on the evaluation before any data are collected and having an effect upon the people involved and the organizations involved because they're having to think about what they're doing, and that has an effect.
Yeah, and I love that because I think that's the first step to make evaluation more used is to have that. People often I hear like frustration because evaluation is not used, but we're not sophisticated enough to say who should be using which part of the evaluation or the outputs and how. If we define that up front, then it's easier to say it wasn't used or it was used. But I think we talk it like in general terms. Then we have evaluants that I really like this category because they're quite different and they're quite. We always think like interventions is like a maybe mm, a summary of all of them, and but not really because there are other types that are not even interventions. So I like this one.
One of the things that systems thinking has come to highlight is the importance of being clear about what you draw the boundaries around. And so evaluation, we say, grew up in the projects with a project mentality. The original evaluand was projects and programs, but now we're looking at other kind of things, systems and organization and initiatives. So to be clear about where the boundaries are around the evaluation has huge implications for how it's designed and conducted.
Okay, then we have category number 6 is like ways of conceptualizing.
Ways of conceptualizing change is intervention conceptualization, and this has taken on an important role in evaluation over time, one that wasn't there in the beginning. In the beginning, we thought evaluation was just going to be about measuring goal attainment. But as the field emerged and we found that programs didn't have well-articulated goals or even well-articulated programs, evaluation and evaluators moved from the back end, determining whether goals were achieved and whether programs were effective, to the front end, conceptualizing programs, conceptualizing interventions, doing logic models, doing theories of change, and that is what brings us to this category of intervention conceptualization. What kind of framework guides the overall intervention and how evaluators play a role in that conceptualization?
Okay. Then we included the different roles that we evaluators can take or can assume. And this category is a bit different, right?
This has become increasingly important in evaluation because the original thinking was that it was going to be always the same. The evaluator is independent, external, neutral. But as the relationships have unfolded in real practice, how an evaluator relates to the people bringing about change and conceptualizing change, how those relationships unfold takes a variety of forms. And this part of the periodic table uh, depicts and captures and honors the variations in those relationships.
Hmm. And it's different from the other ones because instead of putting each of the elements being one choice, each of the elements is like an spectrum. There are two choices in each of them,
Um,
and
because you're dealing with relationship, and so relationships are not fixed black or white, one thing or the other. They are on a continuum.
Mm. Now, the next one that for me also, I mean, purposes are very important, but evaluation questions are also. So for me, it's like the compass also of the evaluation. Um, so yeah, now we have evaluation questions about the evaluand.
And there is here a kind of sequence, but it's not a hard and fast sequence. So that if you imagine within a broad paradigm, you're identifying a purpose, coming up with the intended uses, both of the findings and the processes, getting clear about what the boundaries are around the thing being evaluated and how it's conceptualized, what role the evaluator is playing. We're we're now ready to get clear about the remaining elements that often go into an evaluation. And having all those other things clarified allows us now to get down to these final elements of the design. There's not a sort of required step-by-step nature of the categories. You might well be doing questions uh, as part of purpose and go from questions to findings use and process use, and that illuminates the role of the evaluator as you do that. That it emerges what role you're playing when you're helping people with their questions, but that we placed questions here to make it clear that at the point at which you're getting into questions are supported by all these other elements, by
Mm.
by the purpose and the relationship and the findings that are going to be used and what the evaluand is. So now questions begins to get down to, you can see how questions is going to flow right into methods because now we're talking about how do you get answers to questions.
Should we move to methods?
Yes, now it gets easy.
It gets easy, huh? Finally. So methods, yeah, that's pretty straightforward. It's how we collect data, methods for data collection, because that's something that wasn't in the other one, the distinction between data collection and data analysis. Um, this is linked now. Number 11 is sampling, although we can move to 10, but sampling is clearly linked with methods, right? How we sample, which we already mentioned that is a simplification and we're only getting like types of sampling, not specific methods. And in the qualitative methods, qualitative research book, in your book, there are 40 different types of qualitative sampling, for example. And then we have the evaluation approaches that doesn't necessarily have to be that far. It can sometimes, as you were saying, be discussed alongside with purposes. And here we were also conscious that we're leaving some of them out.
This is a good time to pause and reiterate that accompanying the periodic table is an extensive glossary that defines each cell in the periodic table and each cell in every category with references, and that's available on Sara Vaca's website, lovingclarity.com. The link to the periodic table and the glossary that defines the cells is shown here on this slide. It's also on the introductory page of the YouTube video.
The last columns, methods for analysis. This is mind-blowing that there are so many. I think this is a very under explained and not the quality that I see in reports, maybe including mine, for how we explain this part is always triangulation, and there's not much of this description or explanation on how we're gonna analyze data, either in the inception or the final reports.
And it goes back to specifying uses early on and purposes and being sure that you're anticipating that that's going to affect how you report.
Like uses of the data, well, categories 3 and 4 are uses of the evaluation results, right?
Right.
Mm. Anyway, I'm really happy about, and I would like to dig into all these possibilities for analyzing, because I think is weak in many cases, including mine. Now we have approaches to causality.
This is a really big historical issue in evaluation. It continues
Uh-huh.
to be. And it's controversial how much and how it can be done in a complex dynamic world. And so understanding that there's a menu of options around causality is one of the big contributions of the periodic table.
Is to causality linked to a specific evaluation question, which is like impact, or it is broader than that?
That's a good beginning point for it, but it's broader in this its sense that it's actually linked back to paradigm, because paradigms are actually partly different approaches to causality, different ways of thinking about causality, and so the 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 paradigms and purposes um, even get at whether or not you have to worry about causality. In purely descriptive evaluations, you don't worry about causality. You simply want to know what happened.
Won't be one of your evaluation questions, right?
It would be descriptively the causality is where research comes in about how can you prove it. So it's levels of support for causal claims.
And finally, and this is also new, is reporting approaches or options. So reporting approaches, I'm very concerned about this one because I think that is one of the biggest barriers for evaluation use, is that we have been using genes for 150 years and nothing seems to get genes out of the way. We still use them. And so genes are reports. Reports are there and they don't seem to be going anywhere. And as much as a powerful tool they are for encapsulating information and knowledge, at the same time, there's something about them that don't work. I mean, you have to be very interested in the content to be to use a report that is often long and not very visually attractive.
That's why
So
it's
this
important to have the
category,
options here that are laid out, that there's now to think about, really think about what's going to be useful. And it has cost implications because reports are
sure.
expensive.
Uh, yeah, but here we have a lot of options that are not reports.
Right.
They're all expensive or they're all costly. I don't know if expensive or not, depends on the value. Um, yeah, so I'm pretty excited about this category too, in order to help people open again the possibilities. Although it's hard to get rid of the report. Usually you're gonna do report and something else. And that's something that is very interesting, like why we cannot replace. I would love at some point like to have like a slide doc, that is not very worthy, and maybe a video. But it's hard that a client accepts that as evaluation product or output or
That's the old
deliverable.
results thinking
Uh,
base coming in, that the purpose is to generate a
for sure.
report rather than to generate use.
Think out of the box. So those are the 14 categories, and now we didn't mention them, but under the title, we have like other boxes. We call them frameworks, not perspectives. Can you explain what these are?
The frameworks are some of the ways that people are trying to put these different elements together
Mhm.
into a coherent package. And so we've identified these frameworks as major, distinct, different ways of packaging the elements and categories of the periodic table.
Hmm. So you will find some of the elements that are clearly results based, and you will see the blue, like a blue triangle in on the corner. Some of them are focused on learning, some of them are on critical change, others on systems and complexity, others in transformation, and the ones that have no triangle, they're cross-cutting and can be applied to either of those 5 frameworks.
That's well put. That's right. And that's
Hmm.
a breakthrough. That's good stuff.
Why is it a breakthrough?
Because it really helps identify where frameworks fit in the landscape of evaluation. Frameworks are a combination of these different categories.
Hmm. Yeah, and this is one of the things I loved because yeah, it was like a discovery kind of that emerged from saying how we put all this other layer that is there is it was there, it was floated, and you managed to capture that, and we thought that the frameworks could be a way. Okay, so this is an overview of the table.
Separately, there is a glossary that accompanies the periodic table that defines each cell in the table with references. That glossary is available at Sara Vaca's website. The link to that site is shown here on this slide and on the page introducing the YouTube video. Sometimes at the end of movies, they show outtakes, scenes that were cut from the movie but show its development. And so we're going to give you a taste of the extensive number of different versions of the periodic table that we've gone through, just to give you a sense of the developmental evaluation of this evaluation periodic table 2.0, letting you see the backstory of how it came together. Enjoy.